Back to another live Patriots Beat podcast. I'm Ryan Spagnoli. Joined with me here, Alex Barth. Just want to make a quick note. The Patriots Beat podcast is now powered by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Barth, how we doing?
I'm good, Ryan. I'm good. We're really getting into it here. It's kind of the crunch time of training camp. So fun week. Busy week, but a fun week.
Yeah, a lot happened, right? And I think we can kind of start off. I guess the biggest news of the weekend. There was a lot of stuff to unpack, really, since our last show, which was Thursday. I think the biggest news is obviously Tyquan Thornton, right? Going down with it seems to be a broken collarbone. It seems like from the reports. I know there was several reports out there around 8 weeks, but everybody kind of heals in different ways. And there's a bunch of different ways you can go with that, right? Like this was a big issue with him when they drafted him. His playing weight, is he going to be able to hold up? And no one really knew when it happened. I think we were talking about it after the game, Barth. I think it was when on his second catch, when there was kind of a pile up over near the Patriots sideline, and one of the Panthers guys kind of came in late and kind of knocked the pile down. I didn't see him after that, so it must have happened on that play, or but all in
He
all,
played
tough injury.
Yeah, he played one more snap after that. He covered a punt. I think Michael Hurley might have nailed it down. It is the player talking about. There's a very, very brief shot of him kind of just I don't want to say grabbing at his shoulder, readjusting his shoulder pads, but that's as much as we have to go on right now. I will say, though, just, you talk about, well, this was the concern with him when he got drafted. Obviously, the NFL body, he's a little underweight for what you want to see for an NFL player. I just want to push back on that a little bit because and we talked about this on a past show that he's going to forever be linked, at least in the eyes of Patriots fans, to George Pickens and Sky Moore, who both went right after him there in the draft.
Yep.
People say, well, this is why you take George Pickens. Tyquan Thornton has injury issues. I would just urge anybody trying to make that argument to go look up how many games George Pickens played in college.
Yeah,
right.
That and I guess that the other side of that argument is those big-bodied receivers. They, were they scared of it because of N'Keal? I know different players, right? Different programs.
Yeah.
Georgia's got a lot more pedigree at that position. But I think they, at the time of the pick, they knew what they wanted, and they got what they wanted: speed and playmaking ability.
And like, I mean, no prospect's perfect. That's the thing. Does he need to put on weight? Yes. I'd rather draft a guy who has something as fixable as that versus a guy whose flaw may be harder to fix or maybe something you can't fix. This is the risk you take.
Teach him how to run a route.
Right, exactly. This is the risk you take, and they've run it. Now, in terms of when he could be back, I did some research on this today. I looked at past examples. There's not a ton of great ones just because, so I looked last year, right? Quintez Cephas, young wide receiver, broke his collarbone. Well, he wasn't really consequential to what the Lions did. So they never brought him back from IR. I don't think that's because he never got healthy. I think it just never made sense for him to, come back. So I went a little further. In 2020, Leighton Vander Esch broke his collarbone, missed 4 games. I think that's probably the most optimistic thing. And for a linebacker to miss 4 games after fracturing his clavicle feels pretty incredible. Aaron Rodgers in 2017 missed 6 games after breaking his collarbone. You think for a quarterback with the shoulder, right? That's a big deal. Maybe the best comp, though, it both in terms of outcome and in terms of relatability. Will Fuller broke his collarbone in practice in early August. So, he's maybe 2 weeks ahead of where Tyquan Thornton is. He ended up missing 3 games. So he missed 9 weeks total, 3 regular season games. I think it was August 2nd. I looked this up today, 2017. So if you apply that timeline to Tyquan Thornton, you're looking at around Halloween for him to come back. And every injury is different. You don't know. But just to kind of put some context on it, that's probably about what we're looking at. I would say at some point in I think I just said August, end of October. I think you're looking at it's probably early October at the most optimistic. If he goes on IR, he has to miss at least 4 games. I think you're looking at early October to late October, maybe the first week in November for him to come back, just based on, other players having a similar injury.
And on the flip side, though, are they going to be in a hurry to bring him back, right? And I don't want to say the Foxborough flu, but right, we know that position.
They're never in a hurry with these guys. No, you're right. It's a good point.
Right. So is that a sense where, hey, we'll keep you out 8 weeks because we have 4 guys ahead of you that are veterans and we like what we see from Lil Jordan Humphrey? Are we going to rush you back? And this is kind of the same thing. And I don't want to compare the player, completely different players, but the last time they took N'Keal Harry, he got hurt in training camp. What was it? Ankle. Came back in week 8. I know different quarterback, different scheme, right? But it took him a while to adjust. Are we getting in a situation where it's, hey, we'll activate this guy, but he's not going to be on the field? And then, you blink and he's got 20 catches on the year and it's, he burned a year, basically.
Right. And then next year in camp, we're talking about, well, Tyquan Thornton had that great year last year in the summer, and then we never really saw him, right?
Right.
No, it's a very fair question. Now, I'll say to maybe, if people freak out about that, the last year or two, they've broken trends when it comes to rookies. You look at Ramondre Stevenson last year, right? Non-first round running backs, they never, ever, ever played those guys. James White, 14 touches as a rookie.
And I think it speaks to the college game too, though, of how well they're developing players, especially at these Power 5 bigger programs. Like these guys are coming out more pro ready than they might have been.
So this is why, if you want to have the bigger picture conversation here of why they, changed the offense, the college game had drifted so far from what the Patriots do. It made it so tough for these guys to, you're right. Like physically, they developed them very well, but schematically, it was such a departure. You're in this new offense now. It's going to make it easier. Maybe that does help bring him back. Like they have been breaking trends with this, but it's definitely a fair question to ask. When can we see him again? The other thing, let me actually pull up their schedule right here. They have, and they don't always do this, but in situations with rookies, sometimes they look for, call it soft landing spots, right? Are you going to bring him? What is that? Are you going to bring him back in Green Bay?
Let's assume he's on IR. Let's assume the IR him to open up a spot for a guy, that we'll talk about later, maybe a little Jordan Humphrey. Right. Something like that. So assume he misses the first 4.
Right. And Packers actually week 4. Sorry, not week 5. So he can't come back against the Packers. Actually, you look at it right away. Their month of October, that might be the easiest month on their schedule. It is the easiest month on their schedule. They're home against the Lions, at the Browns without Watson, of course, home against the Bears, at the Jets, and then it's the bye. So those are all pretty soft landing spots, I would think. And then you have the bye, then it's the Colts the first week in November, then the bye. I would think those Jets Colts games would make sense. The bye's a little late for it to be one of these things where like, oh, give them 2 weeks to ramp up.
Right.
But I would think those Jets Colts games make a ton of sense. Jets is a little bit of a short week. They play Monday night the week before, but that would be just, this is no inside information. This is just me guessing based off of, historical context from this and that. That's what I'd look at.
And like you said, I think it's a wait and see with him. We have no idea, right? This could be, he's out till week 8 or he's ready for week 1, week 4. Like I guess you just don't have context on, especially these types of injuries, right?
We'll learn a lot a week from tomorrow because if they're around then. So he has to get
clear the
initial 53, right? If you put a player on IR, and I've seen people say this, well, now he can go on IR and they keep Humphrey. He's
got to make the 53 first.
Right. The player has to be on the initial 53 in order to be eligible to return. If they put him on IR right now, like they did with Malcolm Butler, Juwan Williams, done for the year.
Yep.
So, we'll see, right? If that deadline passes, and sometimes they don't make these moves immediately. So I'm not saying 4:01 on Tuesday, holy crap, celebrate. But if it's Wednesday and it's Thursday and he's still not on IR, well, maybe they know something. Yeah. Maybe, and that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to return in those first 4 weeks, but he's progressed. It would mean he's progressing quickly. There's a shot at it, right? So we'll get a better idea then. I wouldn't expect that. I think he's going to go on IR, but again, if he doesn't, that's kind of the next clue. That's the next, because that's all this is. We're playing detective, right? That's how covering the Patriots works. You're looking for clues. You're playing detective. That's kind of the next time we'll get we'll call it a hint on what his situation is.
And sticking on the receivers, right? We had an interesting situation kind of transpire, I guess, in the last 48 hours between Wednesday or, 3 days really, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Kendrick Bourne gets thrown out of practice Tuesday, the first day of joint practices. Right before the fight, he had got screamed at by Bill Belichick. It looked like an equipment issue. I think the ref threw him out of a play because there's those sock rules right there.
There's something about I forget who it was. Somebody on 98.5 said something about his knee pads.
You can't. I thought it was because you can't show skin on when you have on your socks.
I think he didn't have his knee pads in. I think that's what it was because that rule doesn't apply to practice,
there, right?
Yeah.
So he gets cursed out. He gets thrown out of a play. Belichick curses him out. 30 some odd minutes later, he's involved in the fight, throwing punches. He gets thrown out. Comes back the next day. Wilkerson, too. He gets obviously hurt pretty badly in practice, so he gets knocked out. Bourne that day was working with the twos. And that's when Nelson Aguilar, kind of who had been doing that prior, jumped up kind of in that Kendrick Bourne role and had a really nice day. Well, then
Yep.
Thursday, there was no media availability. And Friday would come the game. He wasn't even there. He was not even at the stadium. So there's something going on. He did make the trip to Las Vegas, so he'll probably be, active this week, and I'm sure right back into his normal role, especially now that Thornton's done. It like you said, and we can get into the trade talks, right? Because there's been tons of rumors.
Right.
2 weeks ago, we're talking about the Nelson Aguilar market. Friday comes out, they're getting calls on Kendrick Bourne, and these wide receiver needy teams are calling. And Barth, the one thing that you've been harping on since the start, and it's coming into fruition now, is it pays to have this depth. Tyquan Thornton goes down. Yeah, it sucks, right? It's not a good
Right.
situation, especially because he's a rookie. But you still have 4 capable NFL receivers, and you got guys that are on the bubble now that life just got a lot easier for them to make that initial 53 that are playing pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with Bourne, this is going to be a big week for him, right? Against the Raiders, he's got to kind of climb his way back in. I still don't think they'd move him.
No,
And I by the way, I didn't think that before Tyquan got hurt. His contract, if he plays up to the level he played at last year, that might be like dollar for dollar the best wide receiver contract in the NFL.
and
800-yard
speaking of it
guy
too,
for
because
under
and this is
7
off
million.
topic, but it relates to Bourne, is like,
Yeah.
we've had comments come through. Hey, what's going on with Duggar? Haven't heard much about him. Well, you saw Kyle Duggar Friday night and just laying the boomstick on Ike
Yeah.
Ekwonu, right? And like Kendrick Bourne's kind of that same guy. Whereas practice, he's the guy, the energy guy. He's not going to really pop, but when the game day comes and the lights get brighter, that's a guy who always steps up and plays above, his expectation. So that's a guy you want around. And in
Right.
the rapport he built with Mac Jones last year, and how I thought he was one of their more important players, especially down the stretch last year when Myers team started to figure him out. That's when Kendrick Bourne really started to catch his stride. I'd say, just about the second half of the season, he was a catalyst for them. And you'd expect that and a little bit more this year.
Yeah, I don't think, and it doesn't surprise me that we've heard that the Patriots have gotten calls on Bourne. Let me be very clear about that. That's been a report that's out there that they got calls on Bourne. It doesn't surprise me that they didn't get into that. Again, the contract, the production, you talk about the relationship with Mac Jones on and off the field, the chemistry. It's in their best interest to turn this guy around. Kendrick Bourne is not a guy you move on from quickly. You certainly shouldn't, right? So again, I think this is a big week for him. Aguilar still makes some sense. Like, he's had a good week. I just think you talked about it before, that depth, right? I think they were probably in a good spot. I don't think that they were won over. Now, look, if somebody's going to get stupid and give you like a top 100 pick for Nelson Aguilar, yeah, you do it. You do it and you figure it out from there. But if it's like one of these pick swap deals, like a 4th for a 6th or something, I think they're probably in good shape right now, especially with this Thornton injury where, like, there's no excess depth. They have good depth, but there's no excess. So I think Bourne's safe. I think Aguilar's relatively safe. If it was one of the two, I think it's him getting dealt. It doesn't sound like they're interested in dealing Myers either, which makes some sense just given his role in the offense. But yeah, it was a rough week for Kendrick Bourne. It certainly was. I don't think it was bad enough that he's going to get, shipped out of town or anything.
Right. And Alex, before we get into another wide receiver that I know both of us want
Yep.
to talk to, I wanted to talk to you about our new sponsor, LinkedIn Talent Solutions. As you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small businesses fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Everybody knows I have another job. I use LinkedIn all the time. Networking is huge, especially in the age of social media. LinkedIn Talent Solutions allows you to create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/beat. That's linkedin.com/beat to post your job for free. Terms and conditions may apply. Alex, want to talk to
There
you
you go.
quickly about Lil Jordan Humphrey, because I forget your recent 53-man roster projection, your 2.0. You didn't
Yeah.
have him on, correct? He was
So,
off,
okay.
just off.
So I didn't
And
as I
obviously,
was
things have
writing
changed.
it.
I don't want to, I'm not
Well,
setting you up
no.
here.
It's
I'm
a
not.
funny story. No, it's a
Yeah.
funny story. I was writing this whole thing and I thought it was really good. I was getting in depth about, oh, he's on the bubble and this and that. And here's why I'm leaving him off, but he could do this. And then I'm like, literally, as I finish it up, because I was writing it Saturday, I know it dropped today. I wrote it ahead of time. As I'm finishing it up, I get a text with the tweet that, Tyquan's hurt. I went back in and changed it. I put Lil Jordan Humphrey on because when I was going to talk about it, one of the lines was, well, if Tyquan Thornton's injury is serious and he's going to miss time. So I have him on. I have him as one of my last guys on. I think like he's a guy, he makes sense. If Thornton's out, he
Oh,
makes
yeah.
sense as a guy to keep. The thing is, I think at this point, when you look at the players like this, right? The guys on the bubble, remember, like we talked about before, for a player to be placed on IR and be eligible to return, they have to first make the 53. So what you have is teams will put those guys on the roster, IR them, maybe cut another player, put that player through waivers and try to get them back. Patriots did that last year with Miles Bryant. They cut Miles Bryant. They put, I don't remember who it was on IR, maybe Steph Gilmore, I think. And then they signed Miles Bryant after because he cleared waivers. Now,
Lil
waivers,
Jordan
any
Humphrey,
team
he
can
ain't
claim
getting
them.
through. He's not getting through
So
waivers.
that's the thing. I think he's done enough at this point. Somebody's going to claim. There's no way 31 teams are going to pass on just adding Lil Jordan Humphrey for free. So this becomes the question, right? Do they want to give him that roster spot off the bat? Has he done enough where they'll give him that roster spot and sacrifice somebody else? Maybe it's a guy like Sean Wade. Maybe it's a guy like JJ Taylor, Justin Herron, like any of these bubble guys. Do they risk putting that guy through waivers and keep Humphrey? Or do they maybe say, you know what, we just don't have the spot for Lil Jordan right now, and they try to maybe give that spot to a guy like Trey Nixon or Christian Wilkerson, if Wilkerson's healthy, who maybe has a better shot at getting through waivers? That becomes the question. I think Humphrey's done enough that they'll give him that spot. But that's basically what it comes down to right now.
And for me, and I floated this out to you, I think 2 weeks ago in person, we were down there, and you hear this all the time, right? Like, oh, just like what they said with N'Keal Harry, just make him a tight end. Like it doesn't work that way, right? But I think where you can get interesting with trying to fit him on the roster, like he's a good player in the middle of the field. I think his skills could translate to that position as a number 3 tight end. And let's put it this way. If he's playing tight end for you, you're in a tough situation because that means either Johnny or Hunter Henry are probably hurt and hurt for a long time.
Right.
Where I think he could get on the team is, they'll carry that extra wide receiver maybe than what we're used to. And a guy like Devin Asiasi, who I think is a bubble player, you carry that guy as a third tight end as like a depth piece. If things really go bad, they're going to play for you. I think Lil Jordan Humphrey can fill that role that Devin Asiasi would play and give you a lot more in terms of in the kicking game. And you can play him all over. Like it's not crazy to think. And he fielded questions this today about, he's open to moving to tight end. And like I said, they might not necessarily announce him as that, but when they come up with their initial 53, they might only carry 2 tight ends, but like Lil Jordan Humphrey's really viewed that way. Like that's a way to kind of work around it too, where you can get everybody through.
Yeah, I mean, you see it with the big slot guys, right? They'll line up in line, they'll block. It's not totally unheard of. It's interesting you bring up the N'Keal thing. This isn't moving him to tight end. That's not what the conversation is. The conversation is he's big enough and he's technically sound enough blocker that he can do some things that a tight end is going to do for you.
If push comes to shove and you really need it,
Right. Or like just if you want to, I mean, it can give you a different package. Maybe you're an 11, right? Or you could even come out in 10. You look smaller, and then he lines up in line. So you look smaller. The defense maybe goes with a nickel or a dime or something, and then Humphrey's going to be able to block against a nickel back. So that's you can kind of do weird stuff like that with it. The special teams is the big thing, Ryan, that you hit on there.
Oh yeah,
he made the team when he downed that punt.
Yeah.
That's where he went from bubble.
Just
I'm
like
not like
Brendan Schooler too. He had a really good day. Like he's probably
so
on the team now.
I had Schooler as my 54th player. I just couldn't fit him. I had him just.
That's a
But
guy they
here's the
could
thing,
probably get through waivers though and bring
right?
back too.
Exactly,
Like
and
as
this is
Cody Davis is probably on the back nine of his career. I think that's kind of the role they're trying to have him
right.
eventually. What does he even play? Is he a safety? Is he listed as a safety? But
He's listed as safety. Most
he'll
of these
never
guys
play
are
that.
listed as safeties.
Right.
Bill even calls Slater a safety. But yeah, with Schooler, and I think, you brought up Devin Asiasi in this conversation too, and we just talked about, can guys get through waivers? Well, the practice squad elevation rules make this really interesting, right? Devin Asiasi is not going to play if he's on the 53-man roster. He didn't last year. He's inactive for every game. Like you just talked about, LJ Humphrey plays teams. Devin Asiasi doesn't do that. So are you going to give him a roster spot to be inactive where they can probably get him on the practice squad? And then if they really need a tight end, they can elevate them, right? You can elevate players up to each player up to 3 times a year. You throw Matt Sokol in there too. That's probably another guy they can get to the practice squad. You make those two guys your practice squad guys. That's 6 games you have of a third tight end. If you need any more than that, where you need like a real true tight end, like you said, one of those guys, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, probably on IR. You could just outright sign one of the two you stash on the practice squad. So,
and at that point, like your season at that position, like you're just looking for something in terms of production,
right?
Like if you're at that point.
And by the way, with the tight end thing, don't sleep on Jalen Wademeyer either. Like he's not going to make the team, but he's an interesting name to have around. But yeah, like they don't need to keep a third tight end. It's the same thing where you go back, they rarely, if ever, keep any fewer than 8 offensive linemen. But you could sort of justify them keeping 7 this year because if you get Arlington Hambright to the practice squad, which you probably can, Cody Rusty to the practice squad, which you probably can, Yasir Durant, and look, you can't keep all of these guys, right? You only have a certain number of practice squad spots, but you get the point, right? If you have like 2 or 3 offensive linemen on the practice squad, or you could even have 4. I think they've had that many. Again, 4 times 3, 12. That's 12 games. You have that eighth offensive lineman. You can elevate. You can sign and release guys and churn through that. So they can be a little thinner at positions they maybe traditionally wouldn't be because of that practice squad elevation thing. And it's going to allow them to keep a guy like LJ Humphrey. Like, if Sean Wade makes the roster, that's probably how he makes it. Joshua Bledsoe, Brandon Schooler, like that's how these guys are going to make the roster. Because, and this is, I talk about this. Evan used to get so sick of me talking about this, Ryan. So we'll see how you like it. And I wrote about this today on 985thesportshub.com. When I look at roster construction, right, you can kind of look, and Bill talked about this actually on Saturday. And I'd never heard him talk about this before. So it was cool because I talked about it last year. You can almost look at it like you look at March Madness, right? You have a 53-man roster, but is it the 53 best players on your 90-man? Not necessarily, right? Because is your backup quarterback one of your 53 best players? Probably not, but he's going to make the team. So now one of your top 53, that guy's out. And if you go, so
I love that analogy.
You love it?
Sense.
So
I do.
Like I did this last year. I went through, and again, the practice squad elevations kind of screw with the numbers a little bit, but okay, historically, what's the over the last 10 years, what's the minimum at each position every team keeps? 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 4 receivers, 2 tight ends, 7 offensive linemen. So it's not necessarily 53 spots can be won by the best 53 players. It's, okay, some of these spots have to go to an offensive lineman. Some of them have to go to a corner. So how many at-large spots, right? Like March Madness, right? At-large bids. How many at-large spots really are there? For, just flat out, there's probably about 13. But then you have guys, right? So 4 is the positional minimum at wide receiver. Well, the Patriots have 5 wide receivers who are locks. So that you lose an at-large spot. They have 3 quarterbacks that are locks. You lose an at-large spot. How many spots are really up to be won on the Patriots roster by the best player? It's like 5 or 6. And there's, I wrote about this on 985thesportshub.com. There's about 13 players that have a real shot at one of those 5 or 6 spots. And that's where you get into Lil Jordan Humphrey, Devin Asiasi, Brendan Schooler. Like that's what we're talking about here. And what this ultimately is, to wrap up the rant, we talk about the term roster bubble all the time, right? As kind of this abstract thing. That's what the roster bubble is. It's those at-large spots and the players fighting for them.
No, makes a ton of sense. And like I said, we'll start to know a lot more I think too, this is a big week, right? Because it's a good
Right.
opponent. Um, they're facing off against, Josh McDaniels, and there's a lot of familiarity there. And, you're going to go up against, another story. Derek Carr's top 15 ish, but he's a good quarterback. Much better than you're going to
He's
face this
starting
past
caliber
week.
quarterback. He's
Yes,
Yeah,
but
he'll be the best. He'll be the best quarterback they face in the preseason. I don't think that's a hot
absolutely,
take.
absolutely right. It's much better than what they've seen Daniel Jones,
Well,
Sam
he
Darnold.
doesn't have an XFL MVP like PJ Walker, but yeah, he's
Yeah.
probably the best.
Um, But anyways, for the corners, gonna be real tough, right? Devontae Adams, Hunter
Yeah.
Renfrow. I don't know Darren Waller's availability. I know he missed early on. I don't even know if he's back, but they got some guys that can play.
Yep.
And I think, with roster cuts the 30th, which is a week
Week
from
from
tomorrow,
tomorrow. They got to be down to 80 tomorrow, and then it's 53 a week from tomorrow.
it's getting tight, right? And this is that last week for the guys, Sean Wade,
Right.
Schooler on special teams, Ossie, Lil Jordan Humphrey, right? Those guys are under a microscope now. I don't want to say Kendrick Bourne. I don't think he's a bubble guy. But it's important for a
Well,
player like him to really, hey, last week was awful. Probably maybe one of the worst of his career. Definitely here. Let's put it past you. Let's go to work. Now he seems like a guy like that. And then two, I want to get into the tackle spot. Bill Belichick
yes.
said Friday he expects everybody to be available. This was before the Thornton injury, right? He did say, unless
Right.
anything comes in over the last 24 hours, I expect all the players to be available. As far as we know, Isaiah Wynn made the trip, right? Did he practice
He was
today?
there today. Yeah, he
He
was
was
there
there
today.
today. Yadni Kajus has played,
Although,
to be honest,
actually, so he was there today, but he was in a non-contact jersey. It feels
it,
important to note.
and no one knows because they don't have to report injuries. Is there an assumption what's going on? Is it the knee again? That seems to be his biggest issue,
Well,
is the knee.
I honestly wondered if it was an injury. I was wondering if maybe he was holding out or something. So he comes back today in a non-contact jersey. That kind of confirms it is an injury. But yeah, in terms of what it is, non-contact, I would guess something, like a knee or a shoulder, and I don't think it's, just like a pulled hamstring or something like that. So yeah, no, and just to backtrack real quick to what you said to lead into this, you're kind of talking about how, yeah, it's a big week for bubble guys like Sean Wade, Brendan Schooler, and then you started talking about Kendrick Bourne. So there's two kinds of roster battles, right? There's, to get on the roster, and then there's for depth chart.
Win a
I
spot. Yeah.
think, right. I think for Isaiah Wynn, that's a huge one. It's game on right now at right tackle to me.
And I
I
and I
think
wrote
between
about
him
it
and
this
Yodny
week
Kajust.
on Sunday on CLNSmedia.com about kind of their plan, right? Because you get a ton of
Right.
questions. Should the Patriots move on from Wynn and save some cap room, and could Justus look good in his replacement? I don't want to I'll say it again. I'm not getting into the cap specifics. I don't even know if it would help them this year or next year with Wynn. It's besides the point.
If they trade him, they open up 10 million in cap. His is an easy
Okay.
one. I normally
So
don't do the cap either, but that's an easy one.
for him though, it's like he's frustrating, right? Like we've talked about all the time. Starting caliber tackle, somebody that, you'd love to have, but his biggest problem is staying on the field. I think the
Right.
biggest issue there is you don't move on from a guy like that simply because if you're probably going to readdress that position in the offseason, like unless he goes out and has a career year and stays healthy, I don't think he's coming back simply because of the issues we just alluded to. But I think it's important, especially if Kajus is playing this well. You saw how last year how important it is to have a viable swing tackle. You had
Yep.
Justin Herron starting, and no disrespect to him, I think, somebody that just kind of got thrown into the fire. But I'd much rather have, especially if Kajust is playing well. He played left tackle Friday night. He looked okay. Like if you can have a guy like that you can play at both positions and solid, it makes that, the injury scares you have with Brown and Wynn that much more feasible if they do go down. And right, that's a position where those guys are going to get hurt just because of the type of beating they take. There's always people rolling around at their ankles, and like that's a position where guys are just going to get hurt. It's really hard to stay, healthy for a long time. So you hold on to Win for this year, right? Unless, like you said, with Aguilar, you get something
Right.
crazy for him. But I just don't think they have the depth at that position to maneuver moving on from him.
I just think what the question becomes is he going to be a problem being here if he's not starting? I would imagine he's already not happy moving to right tackle, right? Go look up what left tackles make and what right tackles make. And he's not going to be a top 5 paid at either position, but just as an example, you average out the top 5 left tackles, the top 5 right tackles, about an $8 million difference per year. Like that's a lot of money you're talking about by moving him to the other side in a contract year. Now he's a backup I mean, I'm not saying that they can't do it. They have every right to do it. It's what's best for the team. But
would you be surprised though if week 1, if he's healthy, like they're going to roll out Yadni Kajus? Like I know we talked about this last week.
Here's what I'm saying. Like I know they would do it because it's what's best for the team. But
do you think it is though? If he's fully healthy,
if Kajus is the better player, you play the better player. What's the conversation? So yes and no. So like in a bubble, yes.
I'm not saying they shouldn't. And I know it's best player, but I just have a tough with how much he's played and how they value him. I'd be surprised. I'm not saying it because Juice has outplayed him. Like there's no question.
I just wonder if Wynn wants to be here, right? Let's say he goes to them and says, I'm starting, or you have to trade me. Like I'm starting every game I'm healthy, you have to trade me. And then what if he falls apart and then you have a locker room situation, right? Like, so here's the thing. I would feel a lot more comfortable. I'm on the fence with trading Wynn. I would feel a lot more comfortable with it if they go to the alignment they had Friday night and Michael Onwenu's at right tackle, because I think that's their best option. And then you put
Ferentz. I think you have a hole there though.
You might, Arlington Hambright actually has looked pretty good.
I think so too. He's looked better, but then you have, I don't know, Andrews is kind of the anchor, but you got a rookie left guard in Strange.
Well,
right. And
so as dumb as this sounds, and you're not wrong, they've already blown the offensive line up so much to this point.
Nothing surprises me.
No, it's beyond that. Why not? Like, it's a valid concern. Like, yeah, all right, well, now you're putting in a new starter the week before the season, and it's very young, and yeah, but you already have 4 new starters at 5 positions. Actually, if you put Onwenu at right tackle, that number might drop because I think he played more at right tackle last year than right guard. It just already feels like such a mess. Why not? Right? Like, I don't know. I feel like if they're going to do this whole rework the offensive line thing, go all in. If you can get something actual for Isaiah Wynn, like you're probably going to get a 4th or 5th round comp pick for him next year. You can get a 4th round pick for him, which I don't think is that ridiculous because, like we said, he's a starting caliber tackle, and he might be a better fit in other offenses. So some teams may value him higher than the Patriots do. Go for it.
Right. No, and I agree. It's an interesting conversation. I think this year, we talked about it earlier, camp kind of got boring, but now it's getting a little interesting with.
I said when we get late, it'll be good.
It is. Yeah. It's coming along. It's nice for covering the team. It's great having quarterback conversation, but in the long run, it's great not having it. But now we're starting to get a little traction on like right tackle and receiver and corner. But anyways, just to kind of get into
one more thing on Wynn real quick, because this just popped in my head. The Bills traded he wasn't a starter last year, but the Bills traded a borderline, low level starter, high level backup guard for a 5th round pick today. Wynn's a slightly better player for his position, which is a more valuable position. So people asking what can you get for Wynn, and also that. And I saw Andrew Callahan tweeted that, Shaq Mason went for a 5th as well. Shaq Mason is older. He's worth more money. This is a young guy. I think the guy the Bills trade is 25, 26. So it's the same thing as Wynn, comparable contracts. That should be the baseline. Like, I think you can get a 4th for Isaiah Wynn. I really do. Just if you use that deal, the Bills deal, and I want to say it was with the Chiefs, but I'm not positive. But if you use that deal as a baseline. I think you're muted there, Ryan.
Sorry. It gets interesting too. Like I said, I think there's so many, especially at that spot, so many different combinations with the whole line and with Wynn. And I don't know. I was all for it. And then I just thought about it with last year when I was asked about it and kind of wrote it out. It's like, it's really important to have, especially with how many new faces on that offensive line. It's important to have some sort of, I don't want to say security because he misses time, but people that have been there, I think it'd be very valuable to have a good swing tackle. Cam Fleming a few years ago was like pretty solid. He was a swing tackle for them.
The one I always go back to is, into the people in the chat. Yes, Cody Ford makes a little less money than Wynn, but the idea is it's a young player on an expiring contract, a team trading for Wynn's end him. The guy I always go back to is Adrian Waddle. Like, Adrian Waddle it's people think, oh, you just play him at left, at right, it's tackle. It's very different playing those 2 spots. Adrian Waddle was really good at playing both spots. They let him go. And then you ended up with the Marshall Newhouse here, because Marshall Newhouse was a left tackle. He'd only ever been left tackle, and they tried to put him at right. He couldn't do it. So no, I mean, I think that's the risk you take with trading Isaiah Wynn. You risk having potentially another kind of Marshall Newhouse situation.
Right. And that was tough.
Wasn't great. People in the chat generally don't like it when I bring up Marshall Newhouse, and that should tell you everything.
No one does. No
Very
one does.
nice guy, by the way. He could not have been a nicer guy, and I felt for him
I'm
because he
sure.
understood that it was a mess.
When
But
when the
it was a
people take
mess.
this too, like when you're talking about a player, no one's going at their character. They're probably all great guys, and like you probably
Right.
know them a little bit more than me. It's just my opinion. Whatever. Like it's
Well,
I'm
no,
not.
it was funny with Marshall Newhouse because he didn't say it outright, but there was almost this like it almost seemed at times he just wanted to be like, they're playing me out of position. What more do you want me to do? And it was like, yeah, I
Right.
get it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
tough. So yeah.
And I'm tasked with protecting a 43-year-old at the time, Tom Brady. Like
Right,
it's
exactly.
pretty stressing if I was in that role. But
Marshall Newhouse wasn't the issue with Marshall Newhouse being the right tackle for the Patriots.
yeah, it was that year for just 2020 was bad, but that year was like
Yeah.
it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
But anything on joint practices you're looking for before we jump into Boston Sports Minute? There's a lot to cover, I think, or for former Boston Sports Minutes. I think we can jump into that for a little bit. But anything in particular, I think it's interesting with McDaniels and some familiarity there.
Right.
I loved Devontae Adams is one of my favorite players to watch in the league. One of my favorite players in general. I think that'll be a true test. Jalen Mills has had a really good camp. And I said it the other night, he locked up some guys early in the week. They didn't even look at him. And I know they had their third stringers in, but PJ Walker, Matt Corral, like he completely took his side of the field away. You're going to get a good test because I think this guy's the best wide receiver in football. One of the best in a long time from a route running perspective and somebody that can be really good at the line of scrimmage. Devontae Adams is the king of that. So that's something to look for. Obviously, we're not there, right? We're just going to be following along like the rest of you, maybe get a little bit more of an insight in terms of, talking to people that are there. So, can't get too in depth with maybe what we see from the past week, but I think it's a good test overall. This is a playoff team last year. I think somebody that I know it's a crowded division, but they should be much more competitive with more, organization from the coaching staff, and they get some sort of structure there now. They got Adams and, they added some pieces. So this would be a good test for them. See how they stack up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the corner thing is probably the biggest, right? I think that position needs more sorting out than any other on the roster. And Adams, Hunter Renfrow, they've got some good depth wide receivers as well. Darren Waller, if he's out there, will probably get some reps against the corners. Is Jonathan Jones going to make it on the outside? If he does, who is it in the slot? I think Miles Bryant and Marcus Jones kind of feel neck and neck at this point. Can Sean Wade do enough to make a roster push? And I'll write about this more. I have coming tomorrow morning on 985sportshub.com on what to watch for at joint practices. The linebacker position is another one to me, right? Juwan Bentley, we know is at the top of that depth chart, inside linebacker specifically. We know Juwan Bentley's at the top of that depth chart. But what happens after him, right? Raekwon McMillan's looked very good, and he's been involved there. I think Mac Wilson's looked really good, but he's kind of fallen behind Jelani Tavai, who hasn't stood out to me necessarily, but he's a Matt Patricia guy. Patricia drafted him in the second round when he was with the Lions. He's, kind of a, textbook Patriots, bigger, fundamental, doesn't take a ton of risk linebacker.
Teams guy though, I feel like I
feel like that too, but they had him out there with the starters Friday night. Bill gave that Sirius XM interview where he said he's going to be a big contributor for us on all four downs. Like, I agree with you. I don't think he's any more of a special teams guy. They seem to love him.
They know more than us. They see more than us. But I think what Mac Wilson's done since he's gotten here, like that guy should be playing 70%, 70% of snaps at least for you. I know they'll probably have some sort of rotation with a lot of new faces in there, but I think when you looked at what they tried to do with the linebacker position, Mac Wilson fits everything. He can play in the, he can play in the flat, he can cover sideline to sideline, he's quicker, he can blitz, he's a physical bigger guy that can move. I have a tough time keeping him off the field, and things are going to unravel, and right, it's going to take them 4 weeks to figure it out. You're going to see guys getting snaps that probably won't in 6 weeks from then. But Mac Wilson's been everything they've needed out of a linebacker.
I have a feeling that this is going to be something we're discussing throughout the year. Why Jelani Tavai is playing as much as he is on defense, and why Mac Wilson isn't playing as much on defense. I think at least early on, I just have this feeling. Get ready to maybe have that conversation a few times.
It makes it easier for us to have a show.
It gives us something to talk about. Yeah. So I'm interested in watching those two things. We talked about the wide receivers, the offensive line as well. Some of the fringe guys too. I saw somebody somebody mentioned Cameron McGrone in the chat. We really haven't seen anything from him this summer. He kind of hasn't hit that level we expected. Ronnie
He looks
Perkins
slow,
wasn't.
man. I know he's coming back from a knee injury, but he just even on teams, man. You watched
No,
his
I
Michigan
agree.
tape, like he was flying around making
Right.
plays. Like he has not reached that. And I think too, coming into the year, that position, it really at all spots, off ball. I mean, Bentley was kind of their guy, the leader, the
Right.
middle guy. Like he had he was a team captain 2 years ago. Aside from him, though, that was like an open competition, it seemed like, at that position. And
Yeah.
he hasn't picked it up. Hasn't I think he's not fully over that knee injury. This is his rookie year, too. We talked about it, right? He missed
Right.
all of last year. He came back late off IR and like practice, but couldn't be active. So it takes some time, but I mean, he's fifth round pick 2 years ago. So that's a quick
Right.
lifespan if
Well,
you can't carve a rollout.
I mean, it's like, like they say with the ACLs, right? It's really the second year back that guys really kind of catch up. But, with McGrone, yeah, it's their first year back. He's a guy I wonder if they can get to they could probably get him to the practice squad. Maybe he's an IR guy. Ronnie Perkins, too. So Ronnie Perkins wasn't at practice today, along with Harvey Longy. They're 2 moves away from getting down to the 80-man roster limit, which is tomorrow. So
I feel like you'd hear
are,
about it if it was Perkins.
are those the 2 guys? It's pretty unprecedented to cut bait with the top 100 pick, and Perkins was 96th. But, it's unprecedented to cut bait with the top 100 pick after just 1 year. But they traded Duke Dawson a couple years ago, a year after taking him in the second round. I don't know that they'd straight up release Perkins. I
They'd
think he's
try
a
to
guy
get
they'd
something.
probably trade, or, he could be a guy that goes on IR. Look, Anthony Jennings, right? Anthony Jennings in his second year, he didn't show much and he went on IR. Kind of the same thing. And now look at what he's done. He's going to be a factor for this defense. So, I guess that's not really something to watch for practice. We'll know tomorrow, probably tomorrow morning, what's up with Ronnie Perkins. But yeah, him and McGrone are interesting cases to see what's going on with them.
Barth, we got to get into it. It's not really
All right.
a Boston sports minute. I guess it can be. We can
Okay.
do
I
what you
have
want.
no idea where you're going with this, honestly. I'm excited here.
But the Brady stuff, interesting. I think we got to touch upon it a little bit. Like you have to. You have to. This had to be in his contract, right? If I'm going to come back, I got to do some family time. We have to talk about it.
It's rich people doing rich people stuff. Talk to me when it's X's and O's him throwing a football. I said this to John when he tried to get me to talk about the Miami stuff. It's not football, right? It's drama. Like if I wanted that, I'd go watch the Kardashians or whatever one of those shows that Evan watches are. Like I don't care. I really don't care.
Yeah, I mean, I don't either. He's not here. It's
Right.
an old wound. I just think it's interesting. Like this would never fly here, and like maybe that's why this all broke up. But I think you could go on a rant about all that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, this week is obviously they'll wrap up on Friday night in Vegas. I think that'll be
Yeah.
interesting as well to see how much they play. I would probably assume maybe the same as last week, maybe a little bit more with less live bullets coming at you till week 1. But like I said, get healthy. These camp injuries happen. You just kind of have to cross your fingers that they lose Thornton Friday night, and for the most part they've been relatively healthy, but
Yeah.
get in, get out, get your work in, and
Knock
let's
on
go
wood.
home. Yeah,
And
right.
again, like knock on wood, I know people are really upset to lose Tyquan Thornton. He's a fun player. He's a rookie wide receiver, burner. I get all that. In the grand scheme of things, though, you lose a player to position you're incredibly deep at for a month and a half. If that's your biggest loss in camp, you came out okay. And again, I know it hurts to lose Thornton. Like, trust me, I was pissed when that news came out. But you look at a team like the Chargers who had like a star player tear an ACL in camp every year for like 5 straight years, right?
And
You're right. It's a get in, get out kind of thing.
With Thornton, it's like, and I'm not defending Nikhil by any means. I'm just saying, going back to that year, like they had done a lot to that position the year before to really try and make things work, right? Like, what was it? They had Gordon in, they had Antonio Brown in, right? And then
Right.
they go out, they draft Nikhil in the first round, and he gets hurt. And people almost, because he was a first round pick, right? I mean, that's the expectations you're given when you're selected that high. But, everybody kind of deemed him at that time. Because if you remember, the first 7 weeks, like their leading pass catcher was James White. Like they got nothing on offense throwing the ball other than James White and Edelman. And he was he was a shell of himself. So they kind of viewed Harry as that I want to say, the savior to the position, which I think was unfair to everybody at the time. And obviously it didn't work out afterwards. Like, things could have changed. And that's what's good. Like, the good news that you have the depth, right? This position has been mightily improved and upgraded over the last 3 years where, hey, Thornton goes down, but you still have 4 very good, capable wide receivers that I'm sure any team in the league would take their depth. Like, there's a reason teams are calling them for
Yeah.
wide receivers. 3 years ago, they weren't. The Patriots are doing they were calling. They need a receiver.
Right. It's kind of crazy. Oh, what did the Patriots wide receiver depth? What are we talking about? It happened very
People
quickly.
will still complain because they don't have the sexy name, but like, they got enough talent to make it work.
It's night and day compared to what it was 2 years ago. Night and day.
Demir Bird was your 2? Like, if you had,
we always pick on Demir Bird, who like I actually like, but you're right, exactly.
But like a name like that,
Demir Bird's like the wide receiver 8 on this team.
Yeah, like he doesn't even make the team, bro. Like, know, and that's no disrespect, obviously. But no, like I said, I think the good thing about that whole situation, if you're trying to find a good in it, it's they get the pieces around it to soften the blow, and they get the veteran presence to get them along. The only thing I'm worried about is the stunted growth, and it could have been a good piece for them. Like that's normal.
I think it hurts more. I don't know that it, in the very short term cost them wins. I think, like you said, you're worried about his development moving forward. Is he going to be able to hit the ground running? Are they going to have to ease him in? Blah, blah, blah. And I think it hurts because he's a rookie wide receiver. It looks like they might have finally had the guy, and now we have to wait to watch him. But they're going to be able to get by. They're going to be able to run their offense without him.
Right. And absolutely.
You hope, right? In a perfect world, you hope that ends up being a good thing because then they don't have to rush him back. They can ease him in. They can let him get comfortable. And that should ultimately help his development.
Right. He doesn't have to be the guy when he comes back like everybody deemed N'Keal as.
We'll see if it turns out that way, but that's what you hope.
We can hope all we want. But anyways, Barth, that was a good show. I thought we had a lot to catch up on. We'll be back tomorrow all week, kind of breaking down joint practices. Like I said, obviously we're not there. I couldn't use a week in Vegas right now. But
who could?
I definitely wish I was there.
Oh yeah.
But Barth would probably show up late. He might be at the casino, but I'm kidding. To practice. But
I'm
no,
going to shows up first to practice every day.
You are always first. I used to be, but it's tougher for me to get there.
I get it.
But anyways, we'll be following. We'll be texting. I think Evan's down there, right? Evan
is there, yeah.
Might have to shoot him a text. Hey, what's going on? Give us a little bit more of an inside scoop than what we're seeing on Twitter. But I'll be back this week. We'll break down joint practices as well as Friday night. The preseason game. We'll have some sort of recap show over the weekend. Sorry we didn't get it out there sooner. I had a busy weekend. You guys can 100% blame me. Barth was ready to rock. But like I told him, once the season gets going, be more structured. It'll be game breakdown, game preview type of thing. And we're starting to catch our stride here, Barth. I'm enjoying it.
A little bit, yep.
I'm enjoying it. So we'll talk to you guys